But ladies, I am so happy to welcome you to today's talk on confidence and clarity in male-dominated spaces. A topic that is very relevant to a lot of you in the community. And so today we'll gain actionable insight on overcoming imposter syndrome, mastering assertiveness without aggression, learn strategies for effective communication, and so much more. So the wonderful Molly Parker will lead the talk today. She's a London-based voice coach with clientele including diverse organizations such as Octopus Energy, the BBC, Amazon, and Molly remains dedicated to unlocking the true power and the impact inherent in each individual's voice. So today's talk will be about 35 minutes, but you are welcome to use the chat throughout. If you want to, you can also unmute yourself, and we'll also have a Q&A at the end. So I hope you enjoy it, ladies, and Molly, over to you.
Thank you so much for that. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm really excited to present. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and can I just have a thumbs up if you can see that? Okay, beautiful stuff. So lovely to meet you all. So my name is Molly. I'm a voice, accent, and breath coach facilitator. So I trained as an actor before going to university, in which both experiences led me to complete a master's degree in voice and accent work, which I know is a little bit niche. And I still work and train with actors to today. I teach at one of the world's leading institutions called LAMDA and continue to work on voices in and off stage. So as well as people like yourself. And one thing that is huge and always comes up is I have a lot of female clients talking about how can I find my voice when there might be an environment that doesn't cater for my voice needs so much. So when we're in an environment that's very male dominated. No one really teaches us how to speak anymore. I find that we very much learn how to read and write. However, no one really teaches us how to perform, how to take on stage, unless you are in the acting environment. And that means that as a skill, then it's very much learned as we go about day to day. It's something that we're constantly learning and constantly picking up. But if you're learning that skill in an environment that doesn't cater for your voice, or where your voice maybe isn't seen, or you can't see people like yourself in that environment, then of course it's going to mean that you're picking up on habits that you may not be able to relate to. So what I try to do, or what I hope to do, is help people try to find their way of voicing from their own body, rather than trying to replicate a way of voicing that they've seen in someone else that they may not be able to relate to. So today's talk, I want to talk about the 3 A's, which is awareness, appreciation, and anticipation. So a lot of this work is really about trying to train the body over the mind. We can intellectually understand everything that makes a good speaker. I can really cerebrally understand that I need to slow my pace down. I need to connect to whatever a grounded voice feels like. I need to be careful of my diction. But it's another thing to try to train our body to do this. And so that's what we try to do in the acting world, very much so as well. But what's important to note that I can't change anyone's environment. But if you are here because you're feeling silenced in any way, or you feel like you really have a lot of work to do with finding your own voice in a professional or personal experience, just know that I hold you in that space. And we can help unlock ways of regulating your own body, voice, and breath, in the hopes that you realize you don't need to be fixed and there's no fixing to be done, but maybe changing gears will help with your situation. An example I always use in rooms like this is I worked with a client last year who worked in a male-only group at KPMG. And before that, they had been in a women's-only group for 7 years somewhere else. And he found that within the 3 months being at KPMG, she felt like she was really in her shell, and she was getting a lot of comments saying that it felt like she wasn't owning her voice, which isn't surprising, right? If you go from an all-female group to suddenly being in an all-male group, you're going to feel like you're closing off a little bit. And so what I loved about the process that we went on is, initially she kind of felt like she had to pick up habits that she saw in her male peers. However, what we were trying to do is trying to find her own leadership style without shifting into a gear that she thought she needs to be. You know, she's a young working professional woman, and she deserves to find her own leadership style through that rather than copying anything else.
I'm going to call you back out.
And the way we can try to do that is by making sure that we're keying into our own body. So to start off with, I want to talk a little bit about growing our awareness. So making the subconscious conscious. If you are expected to make the most out of your instrument, out of your voice, you have to actually become aware of what we're already doing. So I want to try a little bit of an exercise with you all today. And this is an exercise where we're going to explore what our comfortable habit is. We're going to explore this cerebrally and then in the body first. So I want you to imagine you have status on one end and approachability on the other of the scale. And where we need to find is this sweet spot. So if everyone has a pen or even a phone where you can write notes down, I'm going to give you two options and we're going to go through 10 questions. And you're going to write down whether you are A or B in this scenario. And it's just going to be interesting for you to total up whether you are more of an A person or a B person. So the first one, and again, this is going to differ from situation to situation, but let's just see what you think. Can you write down A if you think more about wanting to be credible and respected? And can you write down B if you want to be more likable and you're more empathetic in style or in delivery and communication? So A, more credible, more respected. B, more likable, more empathetic. The second question is, A, do you focus on precision and getting the job done? Or B, do you focus more on people and your relationships with other people? And again, there's no judgment either side. This really isn't, this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do. It's simply noting what your habit is. So A, precision and getting the job done. B, people and relationships. Third question, would you say you're more analytical and objective in approach? Or B, more instinctive and emotional when it comes to delivery or when it comes to work? So analytical and objective, or instinctive and emotional. Fourth question, are you more formal in your style? Do you stand a little bit more upright? Do you own your space a little bit more? Or B, would you say you're a little bit more informal and you're a little bit more chattier? Your body is maybe a bit more fluid. The next question, would you say you're more direct? So you like to tell people exactly how it is, you feel very comfortable with that? Or B, are you more indirect? So maybe you speak more empathetically, you tune in and adapt to what people maybe need to or want to hear. This is my favorite question, but it's a little bit of a holistic one. A, are you someone who influences more than pushing than by pulling? Or are you type B and you influence more by pulling than pushing? So do you tend to pull people in to what you're talking about, or do you tend to push people into the right direction? Next question, A, does your voice tend to sit a little bit lower in the body? Do you tend to ground your voice? Do you tend to keep it a lower pitch? Or B, is your voice a little bit more warmer, more melodic? Maybe it goes a little bit high pitched when you're speaking. Next question, are you more big picture? You focus on the goal? Or type B, you're more into the details? Two more questions. So type A, are you more comfortable in formal situations where you can kind of play on the power? Or are you type B and you're more comfortable in informal situations where you can build relationships? Which one are you more comfortable with? More formal, more informal? And the last question is about how you listen in the space. So type A, are you someone who likes to stay still and you don't do that much social smiling, you don't really nod your head, you just kind of listen? Or type B, you tend to do lots of nodding, lots of smiling, and make the other people feel comfortable in the space? So you can now pop up those 10 remarks. Are you more A or more B? And if you imagine this scale between status and approachability, right bang in the middle is kind of where we want to be with this emotional gravitas. Now, if you had more A's, you are probably someone who leans more into the status side of things. If you had more B's, you're someone who's probably more comfortable with the approachability side of things. Again, neither one of them is necessarily bad, but it's just becoming aware of what your own habit is, so that when we go on to the following exercises, you can figure out which ones you may need to adapt. Effectively, every time you go to speak, your body thinks you are fighting for your life. It is literally tensing in the same way that it would do if you were bracing yourself for a fight, just because it picks up on adrenaline, it picks up on nerves. And so when you're entering a space, your body will go into some sort of autopilot survival response. And what we want to try to do is figure out where it wants to lean into when it goes into that fight flight response, and how we can kind of come out of it and meet the room with where we are at today. So how can we put this intellectual stuff into the body? Like I said, in order to become aware and to pick up on these things, we need to then learn it in our body. So I want you to take a second, and we're going to explore type A and type B, but in a certain different way. So maybe you want to turn your cameras off and walk around the space. Maybe if you have your cameras off, you can just imagine this. You can do whatever you like. But I'd like you to just take a second to look away from the screen from me. You've probably, like myself, been glued to a computer for the whole time. Take a second to look away from the screen. Maybe close your eyes. Maybe take a second to feel your feet on the floor. Maybe take a second to allow the breath in and out. And I want you to imagine you are the person that I described. So the first person we're going to imagine is the person who tends to be the loudest voice in the room, okay? So this is the person that takes up the most space in whatever room they are in. They are someone who is often heard before they are seen. They might be referred to as the class clown in a lot of situations. They are usually the person who interrupts conversations, or they are the person who has a habit of maybe stepping over the line. Okay, so you may relate to this person a little bit, or you may know someone who's like them, I'm sure. But this person isn't mean in any way. It's simply that they don't necessarily have the same observation skills as you would. So there's someone who tends to just bulldoze their way through things. Okay, that's person A. Person B, on the other hand, if you want to shake that off and revert your gaze, maybe look in a different place in the room. Person B is a lot more comfortable with going into their shell. Okay, they're someone who will sit in the background a little bit. They are happy to observe first and speak second. They are often the person that type A might interrupt when doing a conversation. And they're often the person who knows the answer but doesn't put their hand up. Okay, that's type B. Again, you might know someone who's like this, or you may relate to this at some point. Now, I see type A as that fight response, type B is that flight response. And a lot of the times I do exercises like this, a lot of people think, well, type A feels really confident. And you might see a type A and you might think, yeah, they're really, really confident, and they're bold and they're big and they're out there. However, I do think for the bulldozing part of it, it means that they're still reacting to a fight flight response in some way. Because what we want to find is this sweet spot in the middle, where you're neither trying to demonstrate that you know what you're doing, but you're also not camouflaging in the background. It's finding that sweet spot where I don't need to demonstrate to you that I have enough gravitas. I simply do have enough gravitas in the room I'm in. So how do we get there? Take a second to, again, find a different point in the room, maybe look at something else, maybe allow your eyes to close. And we're going to do a little bit of a mindfulness exercise to help us get here. So taking a second to ground the feet again, maybe allow the eyes to close if you're comfortable with it. Take a second to allow the breath to drop into the body and sigh out. I invite you to just take a second to scan through the body today. So maybe taking your attention down to the feet, bringing it up the legs, up the spine, up the shoulders. Maybe you want to roll the shoulders for the first time today. Maybe you want to expand in the space in some way. Maybe you want to relax the head. Maybe you want to sigh out. And after this exploration, we've been thinking a lot about these two polar opposite ends of the spectrum. Are you A? Are you B? Are you a bulldozer or are you a camouflager? Take a second now to just notice how your body feels in the space, right here, right now, in your own spaces, not trying to demonstrate, not trying to show anything, but just reminding yourself that you are in a safe environment in your home. And I want to encourage you to focus on how does the floor feel on your feet today when you're sat down. Maybe you want to imagine that your feet are in sand and you're making some sort of imprint in the sand. Maybe imagine what that imprint would look like. How deep is the sand? Is it deep in the toes or the heels? Is it the whole footprint? Maybe you want to notice how your clothes feel on your skin this evening. What's the temperature like in your room? Allow the breath to just drop in and out as you do this. I now want you to allow your ears to open and just notice what can you hear in your environment. Is there anything going on in other rooms? Is there anything going on outside that you can key into? Maybe you can hear something going on in my space over the computer. What's the furthest thing away that you can hear? And maybe now you want to take a second to open the eyes and look around your space. Maybe even though you might have lived in your house or this room for 10, 15 years, try to find something that you maybe didn't notice was there today. Maybe you've left something out of its place, or maybe there's a mark on the wall. Maybe there's a different shade of paint that's cracking. Maybe there's something in your space that you didn't notice was there before. So we're focusing on what can I feel, what can I hear, what can I see? And when you're going into a space, when you're going into a conversation where you know you might feel a little bit nervous, you might feel a little bit threatened, you feel a little bit disconnected from your body, I need you to go to these three senses for me. These three senses are going to ground you in your body, stop you from trying to become like anyone else, stop you from trying to speak like anyone else, but allow you to speak from your center, from your body, from your space. It's also a brilliant way of just calming the body down. So if you do know that you're more comfortable with bulldozing through or you're more comfortable with camouflaging away, this is a good way of stopping that fight flight response and instead just meeting the space with where you're at today. Because your body is reminded of, oh yeah, I'm not fighting for my life, I'm just in a room. That's all I'm doing right now. Now, that's our foundation that we want to build off. What can I feel? What can I hear? What can I see? If you notice that you are someone who goes much more towards the bulldozer type, okay, so you are much more confident with faking it till you make it, and you're just going to bulldoze through, and you're going to be the best you possibly can. You're just going to go for it. I'd really encourage you to think of an exercise that I call the backward circle. Now, if you are a bulldozer, in terms of the delivery of speech, you may notice that you go a little bit quicker, and you may notice that you are someone who really takes over that space. That means that we want to try to caveat this. And so the backward circle is a technique that actually comes from Qigong originally. And it's the idea that if you take your hands, and you can either do it by the sides like this, or you can do it like this, and you're just going to slowly bring your hands backwards like this, like you are reeling something towards yourself. And in Qigong, the idea is that if I bring my hands to the side and I do a backward circle like this, it helps me to almost center myself. It helps me to feel more connected to my spine. So much of our day to day, we go around like this and we want to hear what people have to say. And I'm a teacher, right? Or I'm a coach. I'm constantly like giving my energy. If I take a second to go backwards, it's like, oh, I don't have to try so hard to get everyone to listen to me. Instead, I can try to trust that if I pull them into what I'm doing, then that can offer a lot of authority, that can offer a lot of gravitas, and I feel a lot more grounded and a lot closer to the present moment, which is what we've just got with our sensory exercise of what can you feel, what can you hear, what you can see. So that's the backward circle. Now, obviously, there are going to be situations where maybe you can take 5 minutes to do this before a call, but otherwise, I have a lot of clients doing this action underneath the camera. So just as a reminder to pull back, or I even have clients sometimes who might wear rings and they kind of do a backward circle with their ring. And it's just a way of reminding yourself that you don't need to be on the front foot. I think especially especially women, we tend to just want to give away our energy to everything that moves. Having a second to collect our thoughts and physically remind us that we can sit back helps build our base. If you notice instead that you are someone that likes to camouflage away and you're someone who's a lot more comfortable with observing first and it's actually you need to take more space, I want to introduce you the idea of the king archetype. Now, this is the idea that as you walk around the space, you're going to imagine you're almost royalty, okay? But instead of just thinking, oh, I'm a king, we're going to imagine that as you stand or as you sit, and you can take a moment to visualize this as well, I want you to imagine that to the left of you, there is another version of you, okay? So you are twice the width of yourself this way. To the right of you, there is yet another reflection of you. So there is another version of yourself this way. So it is like you're suddenly 3 times the width of yourself. And then I want you to imagine that underneath you, through the ground, through the root, there is yet another reflection of you. So you're not just ending where your feet end, you actually go even further, deeper than the ground. And so I'm imagining I'm 3 times the width. There's another version of me underneath. And then lastly, I want you to imagine that you are taller than yourself by, again, yourself. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 shields, if you like, around you. So just by thinking of that archetype, it makes me stand in a certain way. It makes me be aware of my space. I don't want to be too close to anything because it's going to squash my shield or squash my reflections. And it's this idea that you are constantly supported by mirror reflections of yourself. It's effectively a way of trying to expand in the space. The more you expand in the space, the more you can take your voice, the more you can take ownership of your breath, which ultimately helps you in those scenarios. So when you're in those moments where you feel like you're just bulldozing through and it's going da, 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 take a moment to backward circle, take a moment to reel back. When you have those moments where you know you're someone who likes to camouflage through, see what the king archetype can offer you instead. That's all the awareness parts, right? So loosely, you might have a scale you can see it as, and you might lean towards one scale or the other. And those are ways of trying to find that middle ground. Once you've found that awareness, and some of you may be on the call thinking, I'm super aware and I know exactly what my habits are. One thing that we're really bad at is then appreciating our habits. Quite often we find that awareness and then we think, oh, that's so silly that I do that, or you judge yourself for doing that. Whereas actually, at least 90% of the people I work with aren't accessing their whole voice because they have some sort of like psychological restriction because they're judging themselves for it. So this might look like some sort of like shallow breath or tense shoulders or a tight jaw. When you learn to appreciate the fact that your body is camouflaging or is bulldozing through because it's just trying to do its best, then I noticed a lot of that fades. I know that I touched on this, I think, before, but when you are going into the body and you're finding that mindfulness and you're thinking about the space and you're thinking about what can you feel, what can you hear, what you can see, quite important to try to focus on the things that feel good. So not worrying too much about the things that don't feel too good. So something else I want to help with this, because I think, again, we have so many inner critics thinking, oh, I messed up this in this meeting, or I feel like I didn't even speak in that meeting, or I spoke over this person in that meeting. Whenever you find yourself getting into that spiral of judging yourself and judging these habits, I want you to try to do this. So we're going to build on what we've just done. So again, maybe take a second to ground the feet, feel the feet on the floor, maybe allow the eyes to close, maybe take a second to allow the breath in, sigh out. Notice, what can I feel? What can I hear? What can I see? Focusing a little bit on the present moment. And this time we're going to expand in this space and really demonstrate this idea of you appreciate your body for all it does. So take a second to bring your mind's eye down to your belly for me. And as you allow the breath in, we're going to think about the belly expanding in the space. Maybe the ribs start to move sideways. Maybe the belly moves forwards. Maybe the back expands. And when you release the breath, you'll feel that deflating again. And you're going to take a few breaths like this, where you're just feeling an expansion in the lower body, in the lower belly. And release. And again. And release. So this comes into the idea of where we're going to center ourselves. One thing to notice our habits. It's one thing to be specific about what those habits are. But it's another thing to then stop ourselves from getting into this rabbit hole of a day where we're just judging and holding on to what we did badly. So we're going to take a second to center ourselves in this space. Now on the exhale, what I'd really like you to try to do is hit on an S sound. Again, you may want to mute yourselves for this if you haven't already, but you're just going to release on a long S sound on a. Then you're just going to feel the belly deflate, and then you allow the breath back in and do the same thing again. Finding those long exhales for me. You can almost imagine there's a balloon in the body, and so as you allow the breath in, that balloon's expanding, as you allow the breath to go out and you hold the fricative, the balloon shrinks. Then you can move on to a Z sound. So it's like a B buzzing. So rather than an S, we're moving on to a Z. And this time you can even move your hands to the chest and you can feel the vibration. So these vibrations are your sound. So if you ever have days where you feel like your voice is trapped, or you feel like you can't get any voice out, this is a really good way of just allowing the vibration to flow through. And we're just holding on to that buzzing sound, feeling the vibration of the voice moving through the body. You could even allow that vibration and maybe feel it in your lower back or any other areas of bone effectively, and just taking a second to center yourself. And then maybe landing with another sigh.
Milk bottles.
And once you've taken a second to sigh in the space, just then the next step I always say is enjoy this space. So what you've just done is you've kind of taken yourself through an exploration where you've allowed yourself to center, you've allowed yourself to connect to your diaphragm, connect to your full voice or your full body, not trying to copy whoever you think you should be like, but instead you're trying to connect to your sound, your voice. And the next step after that is to enjoy it. I think a lot of you may hate speaking in public. A lot of you may find it very uncomfortable to do so. However, ultimately, if any of you have children or have ever had an experience with young children, you'll notice the joy that comes from sounding. And once you start to enjoy the feeling of vibration moving through your body, enjoying your whole voice, and I often find that that really helps communication as well. So appreciation of the habits means that once you've noticed and become aware of your habits, whether you're type A, type B, you've identified specifically what those habits are. Is it that you speak too quickly? Is it that you have a tendency to camouflage in, you don't speak up enough? Then you want to try to appreciate them. Try not to judge yourself, try to center yourself as well with some breath exercises. And you can do that daily, or you can do that before a call even. Even when you're listening to someone before you're about to go on, you can just think about hissing or buzzing as well. Once you feel that vibration, then you go on to enjoying it. And it's very important to remind yourself that this is very much a daily practice. The third A I talk about is what is worth calling anticipation over acquisition. A lot of the times people come to me saying, I need to fix this about my voice. And you don't need fixing, like I said at the beginning. None of this is about fixing. It's about trying to reveal or find the most efficient way of speaking or the most easeful way of speaking. But also, I like to talk about this idea of anticipation over acquisition because the process of accessing your whole voice is really complicated. It's not something that's a linear process, like much things, right? You know, when you're scrolling on your phone and you're looking at Instagram Reels and TikToks, your dopamine hits you on the quest of finding the reel that's going to make you laugh or the TikTok that's going to make you laugh, rather than ever actually landing on the video. And the video itself isn't the thing that gives us the hit, it's the search for it. Very much like what this process of learning how to find your whole voice can be. It's something that's an ever-going quest, you can see it as. Every day it's going to be different. Your body is changing all the time. Your voice is changing all the time. And so what I always try to encourage people to do in the process of taking this work on is every time you try this practice, whether that is just closing your eyes and feeling your feet on sand, whether that is backward circle, whether that is the archetype, whether that's thinking about what can I feel, what can I hear, what can I see, I want you to try and find something fresh, something new, and something interesting. And you can do that every single time you do an exercise. It's so easy. And I think quite often we really want just like 3 exercises that I can just repeat. However, if you're not being mindful about those exercises, then they're not really going to take effect in the voice. So finding something fresh, new, and interesting is a good way of doing it. I also talk a lot about the idea of being curious over frustrated. And this really helps with trying to speak to people who you need to hold your tongue with, if you like, in a situation, but maybe when you're bringing up difficult conversations in professional settings. For example, I work with a very talented actress who, whenever she doesn't quite understand something I'm saying, she will repeat back with, so I'm curious with how that will transpire, or I'm curious with what you mean by that. And just using the word curious over, I don't get it, I don't understand that, I don't agree with that, often help people open up their understanding and often helps people to see where you're coming from. So if you are having a difficult conversation at work, especially if that's in a conversation in an environment where you don't feel like you can be truly yourself or you can speak in the way that you would naturally do, I often find using words such as curious rather than frustrated are quite helpful. And then lastly, I always talk about this idea of being sincere but never serious. And again, this is part of my practice, and this is what I suppose, have the joy of doing. But when we go into a conversation and we go into a presentation and we think, I need to take this really seriously and I need to be perfect and I need to take this spot on, then actually we often tense up and we go into that bulldoze or that camouflage. If you try to take everything you do sincerely because you're worth taking things sincerely, then actually it allows that level of gravitas or that level of authority without clutching onto everything too tight. So those are 3 offers that I want you to almost tippets, if you like, as you're taking away and taking some of these tools into your day-to-day communication. Finding something fresh, new, and interesting, being curious, not frustrated, sincere, not serious. And then to summarize some of the techniques we've done, effectively, when you're going into a conversation, know that your body is going to tense up and it has a habit. The way we can try to combat that habit is 1, finding grounding, that is literally physically with the feet or taking a second to breathe. Then I want you to try to breathe into what feels good. I invite you to do this by thinking about things you can feel, things you can hear, things you can see. If you're preparing to speak and you want almost a warm up for communication and you feel like your voice is a little bit trapped that day, I then encourage you to maybe go into fricative work, which is where we're hitting on an S or we're then buzzing on a Z. And then just notice that during the presentation, if your habit is to bulldoze, see what happens if you just bear in mind the backward circle or even practice physically doing a backward circle as you speak, reminding yourself that you don't need to be here, but you can sit back in the spine. And then if you notice that you're particularly someone who likes to shrink in an environment, think about this archetype of the king, and hopefully that gives you something to go off of. Thank you so much for listening to all of that, everybody. And I'm very happy, and Christina, I don't know if you want to add anything about going into questions from there, but I'm more than happy if anyone has any questions to put it on the chat. I'm not sure what the easiest way of doing that might be.
Yeah, thank you so much, Molly. This has been so insightful, and it's really nice to go through these actual practices that we can do when we feel in that way. So, ladies, do you have any questions or any situations that you feel that maybe Molly can help with handling at work, or anything that you might be feeling that you want to overcome? Feel free to unmute yourself as well. I'm very happy for you to do that, or you can put it in the chat. So.
That was really helpful. Wow. Sorry for my Alexa calling out. Thank you for muting me. I didn't know how to do that. So that was really interesting doing the A and B. For me, it's the situation I'm in, but I had a stronger B. So would you be saying on average men, because this is about we're working in male dominated spaces, is it that men tend to find, and they've been trained, etc., to be more A, and women are socialized to be more B? Would that be a fair thing to say?
From people I've worked with, I would say for the men I work with, they see people that are higher up in their positions, and they see them as leaders. Women very often have someone above them that they can see that looks like them and is a woman, and therefore they don't see themselves and they don't resonate so much with that status side of things, that type A. So it's a lot easier to feel like or build their communication skills as a type B. And I think it's because we just don't have enough people above us in these big corporations anyway, that we can see ourselves as, right? And so, yes, usually, and I think a lot of it does come from, for some reason, men just see leaders of men. And so they're used to picking up and understanding communication in that way. I think so, from just who I've worked with and the type of work and clients of what they say.
And even if we do have those leaders to emulate, the men that make the hiring and promoting decisions, if they can only see the A's and they don't appreciate the women, you're never going to get anywhere, which is, I think, where I've come up against, but not with your skills now. So thank you.
No, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And yeah, it's a complicated thing, isn't it? You know, I work with a lot of women who come to me and they say, I'm being told I need to be more A. However, I don't resonate with that. Like, I literally just don't relate to that style. And there's nothing about that style which means you have to totally change the way you are. But I suppose it is a case of just broadening our tools, not totally switching gears, right? It's about allowing space for, yes, if I need to take on that king archetype, I can do, and maybe it will help in that situation, but it doesn't have to be my new something. It doesn't have to be my new communication style and who I am as a person. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sophie. Great question.
I have another point, but I didn't want to say too much, but I've just started a new job and it's in London, in Piccadilly, and I see people walking around and they are that king, mostly king rather than queen archetype, and I keep looking at them and it's like, what makes you different? Or like, they might be really rich, I don't know, but they have a thing. It's not just their clothes, they're not all dressed identical. And I think you've just explained, they see themselves as taking up their space, and they're allowed their space and they're present, and they expect everybody else to allow them that space. And then other people are like, oh, excuse me. It's yeah. So that's just interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is really interesting to think of that. And, you know, I often I'm between worlds, right? Because I work with actors and I work with people on and off stage. But something we talk about when you're playing a high status role in acting, is yes, you embody the king archetype, for example, and you expect that you just take your space, all I'm doing there is I'm shifting my alignment. But really, what makes you know when you step into a theatre or you put the telly on, you know who's the king and queen, not so much based off of that individual, but off of everyone's reaction to that individual. Similarly, if you have a boss come into the work, you know they're the high status if everyone turns around to look at the boss. Or if I'm a teacher and I go into the room, I have the status because everyone's done that. And what's very easy to do is people see people like you have just done, people on the street, and you think, God, they have this air about them. And we try to become that person. We try to be that air. But when we try to do that, we're end gaming what we think we need to look like. And we're then trying to kind of bulldoze our way into what we think we're meant to do, instead of trusting that if I just expand, like if I literally just imagine that I'm 3 times my width, 3 times my height, I'm going to trust that everyone around me appreciates that and meets me with where I'm at. And it's just quite interesting because we often, if you are more of a type B, you see that type of person and you think, okay, I'm gonna do that too, and then suddenly you're in type A. So finding the sweet spot is a difficult thing, but it's trusting that all you can do is expand in your space, take your space, find some sort of comfort in that, and it's everyone else around you who will give you that respect and status in a room when you're watching something. You don't have to demonstrate your status in a space. As soon as you start to demonstrate your status, and I'm sure you know people like this, when they're trying to show that they're the boss or show that they're the ego, then they suddenly have no respect in the room. I don't know how much sense that makes, Sophie, but it's something I find.
Thank you, really helpful.
Oh, you're welcome.
Love it. Amazing.
I have a question actually, just regarding, say, I mean, in my daily job, just needing to, it's a very fast-paced industry, and just needing to ask a question during the day, and this is like several times during the day, but feeling as though every time I do speak, I'm just cut off because, say, this particular person thinks that they know, they're preempting what I'm going to say, and they don't. And then I'm having to go back again and go, actually, no, this is blah, blah, blah. And it's just so frustrating. I'll put my cup. Yeah, it's just very frustrating. At the beginning of when I started this job, I was butting heads because I was thinking, hey, like, let me speak kind of thing, but I would just continue to speak. And now I've just given up. I thought this is exhausting. So if you miss it, 3/4 of what I've said, it's just, and it does make you feel devalued. No, I tell myself, okay, well, that's your problem, not mine. But yeah, it can be difficult to do your job, I suppose. But yeah, don't know if there's any advice there.
No, thank you. And I totally understand how you would feel totally devalued, and I've absolutely been there. I'm sure the majority of people on this call can totally relate with that, and it's such a shame that happens so much, and people are usually just so unaware. There are a couple of things that I usually talk about, and again, it's dependent heavy. If you feel like it's being interrupted while you're mid-thought, okay, so if you feel like you're sort of mid-thought and you're thinking through and you're voicing your opinion in the meeting, one thing that I find quite powerful is learning how to close your mouth. Quite often with women, we tend to speak, and then we kind of speak, and I open my mouth there. Whereas if I take a chance to close the mouth and allow the breath in, it makes me feel like I have a lot more power, and it makes me feel less like I need to get all of these thoughts out and you need to listen. And instead, closing the lips allows me to take my time. It's still my space. I'm still speaking, and that's actually something that is usually taught. And it's a friend of mine told me that that's really taught in a lot of masculine spaces, this idea of closing the lips. So that's an offer to you. Honestly, it's more about how it's going to make you feel than it's going to get them to feel. And that's really all I can offer in that situation, because you can't control their actions. What I can hopefully help with, or what that might be able to help with, is you feeling more confident to call that out, and hopefully allowing the lips to close and reminding your body that it is your space and you can say that again and you can interrupt again, that's what you have control over. If it gets to the point where you feel like you're literally just being interrupted and you feel like you don't have someone to go to, I always would encourage trying to open up a conversation with that person or with someone else in the space. I'm curious as to whether that happens to just you or who else it might happen to. Is that something that you can see a common link? Is that something that you feel like is something that you're noticing specifically to you? And I would offer that hopefully there is someone in the company or with the new job that you can maybe speak to about it. In these situations, unfortunately, if you can't feel like you can go into a conversation, I think all we can control is our own confidence in being able to pull it up. And I totally understand why it just must be so exhausting to be constantly interrupted in that space. And you might just get to the point where you just don't have the energy to that day. Is there someone who you think that maybe you could pull that up to, or a HR department, or someone that you know that's happening to as well?
I mean, I've been there 3 years, so, and the person's generally like very lovely to me, but at the same time, it's because I'm not challenging that behavior anymore. So I've kind of become subservient because I'm exhausted by it. So I'm like, you know what, like whatever, you know. So, but at the same time, I think it's not a great way to be. But I'm very direct. I don't use as many words when I speak, because before I know it, he's left the room and he's already, and I'm like, I'm like still trying to get my stuff out because everything is so fast. Like it's just, being a huge minority in the company as a woman was, I have observed, I have for myself, so I thought, okay, maybe it's not personal, let's have a look around. But it's, yeah, I guess it's difficult because it is mainly male dominated. But yeah, I've tried different tactics, and then I brought it down to probably at the core, the respect is probably it's just not there. And I felt like it was just because I'm a woman. So I suppose I'm like, I don't know, it is what it is. Like, you can't change people's minds either. But yeah, I suppose I've just tried to change tactics in terms of just being more direct, changing my tone of voice, because I have played around with that.
How do you set up the conversation? Is it a space where you could say, look, I have these loads of questions, can I just have you sit down with me for a second and I need to go through all of these?
Yeah, but it'll be like super fast because they've got to run. It's we're in an investment bank, it's just bam, it's, you know, running here, yelling at there. Sometimes I put my hand up, sometimes I'm pointing. It's just yeah.
Do you enjoy that fast-paced environment?
Yeah, I do. I love it, but at the same time, it's also like can be very exhausting.
Yeah, I bet it sounds exhausting. So I would say, honestly, the thing that I would offer here, again, being in the situation where I don't know how much I can change your environment, and I want you to protect your energy and not feel like you have to change someone else's reaction to you. I would say backwards circling before you go into work every day, even on the tube, just taking a moment to de-stress, taking a moment in and out throughout the day to take a second to de-stress, and effectively just think about, what can I do to go into this situation to prepare me the best I can to try to get this person's attention. I would still encourage you to try to think about pulling, because if someone is in that fast-paced environment, hearing a voice that is a little bit slower and is maybe, as you said, a little bit more direct, maybe changing your tone might help. But unfortunately, it is one of those things where it's either someone like myself is brought into the company to talk about it, or it's just making sure that you're protecting your energy in whatever way that means for you, whether that means taking 5 minutes before you go and speak to that person. But unfortunately, I can't change that environment. And unfortunately, it does happen. So I'm sorry to hear it's happening to you.
Yeah, I think in those environments, I've definitely noticed it, because I haven't always been in those environments, but quite very interesting. But you do get a very similar person, like almost everyone's the same. So you do get, so I do feel like a minority in that respect, because I'm like, but yeah, it's a good learning experience though, but it just, interesting to navigate.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Thank you.
But
That's
thank you so
helpful.
much for sharing, Vicky. Thank you.
Yeah.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Anyone else has any questions or anything that you would like to share, ladies? You are also welcome to reach out to Molly. You shared your LinkedIn as well, Instagram, and your email address, which is very helpful. Thank you so much for that. So if there's anything that you might not want to talk about right now, but you probably want to just send an email or a message, then feel free to do that. And how can ladies work with you, Molly?
So if you reach out to me on email and you just want to talk to me, or even if you're someone like Nikki and you want that space just to kind of speak through things in a little bit more detail, you can reach out to email and we can literally just start to go through comms that way. I offer a free consultation to anyone who ever works with me. So even if you just want to book in a session, you'll be able to find my Calendly on all of the links on all of the things and just book something in and we can have a chat there. And yeah, that's how you can reach out.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Molly. Really, really appreciate all the wonderful tips and things that you shared. We'll definitely put them into practice. And yeah, hope to see you soon, ladies. Have a wonderful rest of the evening.
Thank
Thanks,
you so much,
Esther.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.